their magnitude of their operation
Your electronics
outside
don't
West
seem to
Asia,
work.
especially for South Asia and so forth, and how they became developed hybrid capabilities. So all this is quite good material for you to now discuss. And please, if you have
It is General
questions,
Mehta who
press
wants to?
your ID to the device on your table.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that and
General
indicate,
Ashok Mehta.
who
Thank
your
you.
preferred
Thank you,
speaker
Chairman.
is to respond to your question.
People are complaining.
My eyesight is still good, yeah.
Yeah, people are complaining that I haven't asked a question.
Yes, please put
So I am going to ask a question. It
Yeah.
will be more in the form of
you can get
a statement, but you will find the question couched in that statement. My first remark would be to congratulate the three speakers for an excellent set of presentations, but more to the organizers for having put two of the world's most deadliest terrorist organizations in one panel. Both the LTTE and Daesh had a couple of things in common. And the most common of these is the fact that they both held territory, ran a parallel state, the LTTE for decades, and the Daesh for a much smaller period. The second characteristic of these two organizations is that in their application of military skills and use of force, they were adept in the use of both these techniques and were ruthlessly deadly, which in fact the LTTE, somebody made a comment that the LTTE did not have a concept. I think it was the last speaker. The LTTE had a very detailed concept of how they were fighting and what their end game was. And no terrorist organization in the world had a triad of suicide attackers in the air, underwater, and on ground. Nobody ever before, and nobody in the future will have that capability. Having said that, my second comment is in relation to defeating terrorism. I think this morning somebody made a comment about the defeat of terrorism within the rule of law. I think that's a very important concept, especially in the 21st century. And that is more so when the application of hard power or kinetic power is not visible. So there are two things that are most important for defeat of terrorism. One is to defeat the military skills of your opponent. And the second, which is more important than the first, is to defeat the motivation that makes that terrorist fight. And of course the rule of law. And I would add to this that the Sri Lankan army, in its campaign against the LTTE, displayed both these factors. Both these skills were demonstrated amply by the Sri Lankan army. And in my paper that I presented in Tel Aviv on defeating the LTTE's terrorism in the 21st century. By the way, Sri Lanka is the only example in the world that has defeated terrorism root and branch. I think one of your speakers, the lady speaker, said that the leadership was wiped out. No, it was not just the leadership, but also the rank and file. The exception is that she herself mentioned that the diaspora effect was not completely addressed. So this is absolutely exceptional that root and branch elimination of LTTE was achieved. So therefore, I would like to compliment the Sri Lankan Army for that tremendous achievement. And the question that one needs to ask is, how is it that a country that did what it did allowed what happened on 21st April to happen? Because till 20th April, everybody used to say, look, there has not been a single attack since 19th May 2009. And you see, and I'll conclude by just one sentence. And that is that in countering violent extremism, the first principle is prevent. And I think somewhere down the line, either it is complacency or you take your, as they say in cricket, and Sri Lanka is a leader in world cricket, you take your eye off the ball, you have the kind of thing that happened on 21st of April. And therefore, that's the big question. I'm sure that the country and its intelligence and its military is addressing that how did this happen in Sri Lanka. Sorry for the time that I've taken.
Thank you very much. I think you had an observation and a question. Would you like to? Yes, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much, General Mehta. When I talked about the LTT, I think maybe you misheard me. I never said there was subpar. I am actually looking in my study at what I call the super-empowered insurgent movements of the late 20th and early 21st century. And one of them is the LTTE, the other is the FARC in Colombia, Hezbollah, Taliban, and IS. And I'm looking comparatively at where their strengths and weaknesses are. And of course, this was, as you said, one of the deadliest terrorist/insurgent groups, hybrid entity that was very, very ruthless and competent in its activities. Actually fought land battles as well as naval battles with Sri Lanka. So I spent 3 months studying them at the, as a guest of the Sri Lankan military in 2010. So I'm not underestimating them at all. I'm just putting them as part of that slice of super-empowered insurgent groups. Your point about territory is well taken. In contrast to the past, where we call universal mobility of terrorist and insurgent groups was one of their strengths, one of the things that now they actually argue for, especially IS, is territoriality. And here it's where it's different from AQ, whose main theorist, Seth Mariam Nassar, said, we don't need territoriality, we need mobility. And the notion of being able to run away and fight another day is their conception of, it's similar to the notion of the Flea and the Elephant by Richard Tabor's book. Pinprick attacks. ISIS had a different methodology, which actually stemmed in some ways from people's war operations as used in Indonesia, Vietnam, and China. Establish territorial sanctuary and then expand from it like an oil spot. So in other words, and here we have to be also very careful of the terminology, because terrorism is to call somebody a terrorist is not a polite it's a term of opprobrium. The methodology of, say, urban guerrillas like Carlos Marighella and others in Brazil failed. Then you have the Foucaultist approach of Che Guevara and Fidel Castro, which succeeded only in one place and failed in Bolivia. But so when you come to entities like ISIS, Hezbollah, the FARC, Taliban, and so on, they're an outgrowth and modification of the most successful form of People's Revolutionary War, which had a Marxist variant, China and Vietnam, and a non-Marxist variant that you find in Indonesia and the FLN in Algeria.
Thank you very much. We are, time is up, but the conference coordinator kindly says we can have one more question if you have one more question. If not, we can conclude.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I would like to ask Professor Hashim,
Last question, yes, please.
instead of finding solutions to terrorism, why don't we call for a just social order to prevent it?
Like ISIS, Hezbollah, the FARC, Taliban, and so
That's
on.
the question?
Okay, I may be the wrong person to answer this. I'll try and answer it because I do believe there is some aspect here. To some extent, yes. You remember when I said that one of the things that is why ISIS is coming to the region is to exploit political and socio-economic marginalization. The problem with this is, as I also said, it's not only poverty that causes it. People with identity issues who could be rich. The family that did this Easter attack in Sri Lanka in April were not poor. There's also the aspect of nuclear families who are engaging in terrorist activities. We have lone wolves, we have networks, now there's the notion of nuclear families, meaning essentially husband and wife and children who are brought into it. You see this happen in Sri Lanka, you see it happening in Surabaya in Indonesia, also in Mindanao in the Philippines. The issue, and the Malaysian government is worried by the notion also of nuclear families involved in this. So you can be rich or poor, and in my view, social equality and social justice may not resolve, it may go a long way, but it will not resolve it fully because, as I said, one of the big aspects that is creating, in my view, non-state or movement violence is identity politics of the various religions around the world.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be more questions, but unfortunately we are out of time now. We have exceeded our time, and thank you very much indeed.